So welcome to the Famous Kickoff. Hey, hey. So that's the first meetup probably in the long series. And I'm Alex. I need to say thanks to Jeannie Feldkamp. She's from Famous Marketing. She sent me the T-shirts and the stuff and stickers. Of course, thanks to Google for hosting us. And now let's start. So before we start, I will give a few words about myself. So I'm a web guy. I'm doing web for 8-9 years, something like that. I worked in these companies, so if you work there too, please come and say hi. If not, come and say hi anyway. I'm doing some private projects. One of the projects I doing with Famous, so that's how I started playing with the stuff. Alex. So I will give a little introduction what Famous is about, and after that Avi will dive a little deeper into how you start a project with Famous, and then Gilles will tell us about integration with Angular. So what is Famous? If you look at their website, that's what they write. So it's a free open source JavaScript framework that will help you create smooth, complex UIs for any screen. So the keywords are marked in red. And we will see why. But first of all, I will show you some demo. It's an app which was developed with Famous. Just pay attention to the smooth animation and all the transitions and stuff that you see. So it's some photographers' conference in France or something like that. So they made an app with Famous. And as you can see, it works really, really smooth. And I will show you another example. You probably saw it. It's not working so well. But we have a periodic table here. You probably saw it because it was part of marketing video of Famous before the launch. So you can play with it here, and it's not WebGL, and it's not Flash and other evil stuff. It's just CSS. You can rotate and go in and whatever. So all the links are in the slide, so you will find them. And a little about history, how Famous started. It started as a private project in 2011, and they had some seed funding of 1 million. After that, they had another funding of 4 million, and their official released on 9th of April. It means they are half year old officially. And 2 months before they had huge funding with 25 million. If you think of open source organization that getting this amount of money, it's really huge. And the founder is Steve Newcomb. So they have the version 0.1. They had it on 9 of April. And currently we're on version 0.3. There is still no wrapper. I mean, if you write your application, you write it on JavaScript. But if you want to wrap it specifically for some platform, for iPhone, Android, whatever, you have to use some wrapper. You can use currently Cordova, Trigger.io, or any other. There are few. There were some rumors in August that they're gonna release the wrapper in the 0.3 version, but it didn't happen. There are also another rumors that it's gonna cost you money to wrap your application, but it's just rumors. Meanwhile, so there is a lot of JavaScript frameworks. Part of them are only for mobile, and part of them only for desktop, and some of them doing both. So why we actually need another one? So the catch is that the catch is performance, because a web app must have at least 40 frames per second, so it will feel like a native app. And Femius promising something like 60 frames per second, and we will see now how they do it. So how does it work? So it's 2014 already, and we can do really great stuff with CSS. And just to show you some examples, this is written entirely in CSS. The Wi-Fi is really slow, but it's just jQuery, I think, CSS transitions, and nothing more. And you have this site, which gives you some creatures written with CSS, and you can create your own, and so on. There is another one which shows you the cat, and this cat can become really fat. Yeah, the internet is sluggish, yeah. But at some point it becomes fat, and yeah. So it's really cool. And even more, you can have your 3D solar system writing with CSS. All this stuff are in CodePen, so you can see all the code. You can also play with it here a little. And you can see it's written entirely with just CSS transition and some other stuff. No famous. Okay, so internet is slow. So how does it work? Before we had Femius, and we need to do some animation in our browser. You probably need to trigger some CSS-based animation in your browser, and then browser knows how to apply hardware acceleration and recompute the layout of your page from the DOM change. It means then if you have a lot of nesting in your DOM and you want to animate some button which has like 15 items in a hierarchy, so it will behave really slowly. What happens in Femius, it uses two things. It's matrix 3D transform and request animation frame function. So the things marked in red, we will explain them now. And Femius describes the complete layout and animation of your app, and it's accelerated with consistent performance. So what is matrix 3D? It's a CSS function. It's described a 3D transform as a homogeneous matrix. It's just matrix of 4×4 numbers, and you can describe your CSS transitions with this matrix. And you have functions in CSS that get parameters of the matrix and create the animation for you. So what you can do with this matrix, you can do 4 things. You can do rotation. You can take an object, div, input, whatever, and rotate it. Or you can do scaling. You can stretch your object, or vice versa. You can do skew, which is moving the axis. And you can do translation, which means just move the object as is to some direction. And each of these things you can do on all the axes. So this way you can do almost any animation that you can imagine in 3D. That's an example of the worst slide that you can put in your presentation. Like, don't do it. It's just the best description that I got from the internet. Just let's read it together. The request animation frame function tells the browser that you wish to perform an animation and requests that the browser call a specified function to update an animation before the next repaint. So you have some function which basically says, I want to move some element from that point to that point and do some animation. And the browser knows how to deal with it. And the number of the callbacks, which is called, is usually 60 times per second, but it will generally match your display refresh rate. So that's the number 60 that you saw before. And a long time ago, if you want to do animation or something, you would probably use timeout or some other JavaScript techniques. But request animation frame is the browser function, and it's available after IE, ESR, and all the normal browsers. So ESR, I10. Yeah, so what it does, it's optimize concurrent animation. If you have 2 or 3 things animating on the same page, it will optimize it and make it run better. The tabs which are not visible will stop the animation, which is not the case if you do it with timeout or something else. And because of that, partially, it's less CPU, GPU, memory, and if it's mobile, it totally saves battery life. So that's the point in general. What happens is the part of the reasons why Femius are doing so smooth animation is that they don't use DOM, because in DOM you can have a real big nesting and you want to animate some button. So your browser will have to get to the button and do the animation, and going over all the nesting in the DOM is taking time. So Femius is using something called surface and modifiers. When surface replace everything you know in the DOM. Can be input, div, whatever element you can think of. And modifier describe the behavior, how they behave, animate, whatever. And Avi will explain much better, I guess. So I will not dig into it. And Femius also has a physics engine, because if you have animation and you have some things moving on your screen, you will probably want to define some restriction and constraints and stuff. So in Femius you can define bodies, which can be anything. They have a list of defined one. They can define walls and balls and rectangular prismas and all other kind of stuff. They have constraints. That's the way the object can be connected. You can connect the ball to something else, and if you move something else, it will move together. And it have forces, which they define it as soft constraints, but it's just forces as you can think of it. It can be a gravity force. It can be, I don't know, if you have a spring, it's the force of the spring, and so on. So I have also a small example of the physics. No. Yeah, it's really slow. So you have some balls here, and you have gravity, and you can move this box and play with it. So that's just a small example. There are a lot of integration starting with another frameworks. There is an integration with Angular, integration with React, integration with Meteor, and some others. If you just dig into the GitHub, you will find many of them. And this is just a bunch of links you should definitely check out. They are working really hard on the documentation, so there are still stuff to improve, but it's pretty readable. For the guys who need the book, there is a book that's gonna come out soon, and it's just a useful links to look at. So that's it, basically. Yeah, questions? Yeah.
On the previous slide, you show a generator. Is it a Yeoman generator or?
Yeah, you have. Okay. Yeah, you have a Yeoman generator. It defines basic code for example app. It includes bower RC and grunt file for the.
And the other question, I read somewhere that the famous thing was bragging about how they took a new employee and he was able to recreate face-to-face application in Famous in less than a week. Maybe you've seen that, but at the time that I was reading it, they didn't release the code. It was really like fancy. Is there anything you know about it? Maybe you can release it?
No, the only thing I saw is someone wrote like Twitter pages. So no, didn't see Femius. Didn't see. Yeah.
It looks fancy. I suggest we all follow.
Okay. Any other questions? Something?
Add CSS examples
Two?
to CSS examples page.
You sure? Yeah. Send me. Yeah. Okay.
Most of the stuff you mentioned is noted how to request animation frameworks went around, matrix went around using hardware CSS CSS basically for when animation has been around. So what's the novelty? Is it the surface thing? Or?
Okay. So the question was, what's the novelty, because all these things were existing before. The novelty is that the famous don't use DOM. So they have maximum 2 levels of nesting, I think, and it speed up the animation. Right, it's the connection of this frame function and the transitions and the physics framework, which weren't exist in previous frameworks, I think.
So it's a bundle of features. That's what it is.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I'm going to talk about that. But, we went to what is called the lab, a famous company, can invite you to their offices, so you can sit there and work, try out a few things, and speak with the developers. So I spoke with the CEO, Steve Newcomb, and asked him, okay, you now have a framework that is open source, so all of your tricks, they are published. Whoever wants to use the request frame, even if you've done an optimization on the cycle and you've done something very smart about it, can just take the code, do his own fork or do his own project aside, and how are you going to compete about that? And he said to me, you know what, I don't want to be the best framework, I don't care about that, I want to be the last one. And I have enough money in my pocket so that if I see now a new opportunity, a new framework, a new open source library that can bring something to me, I can go there and buy it. I will grow like that. My vision is really long term. We're going to add a lot of tools because I don't want Famous to be only a framework, so I want to give the developer the tool for doing testing, unit testing, end-to-end testing, building their application on the cloud like a PhoneGap builder would do. And with all that environment, you will stay and stick with me if I give you, as a developer, the best performance you can achieve writing an hybrid application. So I think that that's really the what makes the framework a little bit different from an open source initiative that would stay alone and could die in a few weeks or in a few months. Does that answer your question?
So you're saying it's a composite long-term vision that encompasses many aspects of developing graphical space.
And it's a company. Right? It's really a company.
Yes, but that led me to the next question about the company. The way they release stuff, basically they gave us 2 years of bullshit. Do you trust them? Because they are a bit weird. It's not a common open source software.
Yes, I do, but but it really depends what you do. I mean, you need to take into account that it's really early stage, so you should use it only for your private small project.
What worries me. What worries me that they're gonna change the license. They're gonna start asking money for stuff. That's something is
No, they
fishy.
have been very, I'm sorry about that. They have been very clear about the fact that the source code is going to stay open source. And you have a lot of other initiatives. You can compare to Sencha, for example. Sencha, HTGS started their business with a license that is a paying license. And they're telling you, okay, you can take our code, develop whatever application you want to develop. If you don't pay us, then your source code, even you developed it, is ours. Okay? So it's kind of a tricky business if you don't want to pay the license. So Famous said from the beginning, what we are going to open source is going to be free. We are never going to change the license. Okay? We just want to be protected if you try to copy our code and do something.
What is the license, by the way?
I think it's I don't know. I have to check about that. I'm not sure. And all the tools that they're going to build up the framework helps you deal with the framework and write the code, then they have a business model with payment going on that layer. But the lower layer of the code is going to stay free and open source.
I don't want to complicate it too much, but what's the difference between 3JS and Famous?
Great question. I have no idea. Maybe I can ask you and can answer you.
You mentioned it's two-layer deep DOM, so it means like you cannot take existing websites and just...
No. So, you have several ways of using Famous. You can use it as what I call pure Famous.
Vanilla.
Vanilla Famous. And so, you write your whole application, your whole website with Famous from top to bottom. You have a layer of abstraction, so you don't see the DOM. And the render tree of Famous is responsible for persisting the renderable element into the DOM, so you can see them on your page. That's the first layer. Second way of working is more jQuery plugin way. So they're gonna give you a small script that you can inject in your existing website. So you're a web designer, you want to change the carousel components. You don't want to be an expert in Famous, you don't want to deal with all the complex stuff of animation. You just want to throw your component on your page and get the result. That's the second way of working. And the third way is that they're going to bind with existing framework. So you get the architecture, the logic business that Angular JS can give you, like Meteor can give you, like React can give you. And on top of that, you're going only to give the responsibility of the UI layer to Famous. So you keep a well-structured application and you plug in wherever you need in the UI the Famous stuff. But you can also bind together two different frameworks. I have a small pop on my GitHub where I have Ionic, and inside the Ionic scroll view, I have surfaces coming from Famous. So I can animate the element of my scroll view using the animation of Famous, but I keep using something else to wrap my whole application.
The question was, can I use it in production or not? So I guess not yet. I don't know if someone using Famous in production.
We have an app
so
in the App Store right now that's using Famous as a rendering engine.
What's its name?
Hmm?
The name, what's the
the
name?
name.
Unique. I'm going to talk about that.
When?
In the next right now.
Yeah.
Maybe you've answered it already. I was outside. Following this question, actually, is Famous committed to any kind of backward compatibility for code that I built right now? Will it work in future versions, or will it go Angular?
Okay, so the question is about compatibility. I don't know. I don't think.
Was there any announcements made?
Normally in version 1, there is no commitment.
It's still really early stage. Yeah.
It's probably the code is going to probably become simpler and simpler all the time. What they have really so far is really the core Famous, and with a very limited set of widgets and utilities. You have really the core object of Famous, and their vision and what they're going to provide is they're going to add more and more layers to facilitate the life of a developer, and they're going to add widget. You're going to have a library of components like you have in Ionic, for example. They have just announced a partnership with jQuery, where all the next, the jQuery 2.0 widgets are going to be powered by Famous. So that's a pretty big announcement. So, yeah, jQuery UI. So the library is moving forward, and there's a pretty good chance that whatever you write right now is going to be obsolete in 1 year. But that's the way it's going to be for a very early stage library.
Yeah, like an
Yes.
angular.
Like everything we do. So
It's better this way. Really?
You mentioned in the definition that it's for writing smooth and complex application.
Mhm.
So how complex did you get? Did you counter the limits of the complexity of the framework allows?
Okay, so the question is about the complexity of the code. Not really. I get to the point where I need to break my one and only JavaScript file into many, but not really. I mean,
I meant in terms of functionality. Does it allow you to do really complex stuff?
I think it's just JavaScript. You break it into models, you manage your models whatever you want, in which. So, yeah.
but if I can also.
Sure.
The other limit of Famous is also the device you're gonna want to run your app on. It's not magic. It's not magic. It's good Famous, but if you try to run it on an old Android device that is on 2.3, it's gonna be slow anyway, like any other JavaScript framework. So depending on what your target is, if you want to target the latest iPhone, it's gonna be smooth. It's gonna be pretty hard to make it slower. But if you target an old device, it's gonna be slow, and that's the limit you need to balance when you write something in JavaScript for mobile apps.
Is it Canvas at the end? I mean,
DOM. It's a DOM.
it's regular DOM.
Regular DOM. Yes.
Same
You have a mixed mode, meaning if you want, you can output Canvas, but the base of
No, I mean what Famous do. What
Famous
does.
is DOM.
Canvas is just another surface that
Yeah.
you use in your app, and then they convert it to whatever's needed. So, any other questions? Something? Yeah.
Given that Apple changes the internal rendering engine that's used within, what is it called, the Safari embedded object, what guarantee do you have that something that works for you right now in Safari or even in the embedded object will be working in the next iOS version? What kind of cooperation or what?
It's CSS, so they are plugging into the CSS 3D matrix. So if the browser supports CSS transform, you're gonna have support for.
No, we're talking about speed though.
Yes,
The changes, they change.
They make it
I
faster.
think,
but it's not going to get worse. It's going to get better. Yeah.
Because in iOS 8, for example, the full screen API went out of the window, for example, so it can go back as well.
Yeah, but we're going to show in the second presentation a small example of how you can mock a native application. We're going to do that on Flickr. Okay? And I'm going to show you how it works. And you're going to see that there's no reason why Apple could change the web view and make it incompatible with Famous. I don't see that happen. I see that because we're talking directly to the GPU, when we're doing a CSS transform, it's going to get better.
Okay.
But you wouldn't get any more guarantees if you choose Ionic or any other JavaScript framework to develop your app. That's the way it is.
That's the life.
All depends speed of smoothing from their details and on difficult 3D model.
It's a question for Avi, probably.
They just announced the famous WebGL thing last week, so I didn't get a chance to test it so far.
Any other questions? I'm redirecting directly to Avi, like you can just ask him.
I've looked at Famous and I've seen a lot of direction at mobile. Does it have any tools to have a cross-device app responsive for desktop and mobile device?
If you go to the Famous website, famous.com or famo.us, it's written in Famous and it works on the desktop. So the Famous is agnostic of the device you're going to run into. It's supposed to work on desktop and mobile, but I haven't checked in older browser what it's going to be. I didn't check in IE7 or things like that, but
No, I mean
I don't think so.
devices to
Well,
different devices, not older versions of the same app responsive to
oh yeah,
desktop and mobile.
yeah. You can. I mean, when you work,
you have to write the responsiveness.
Yeah.
Right? But you can use. They have a layout like a grid layout that will adapt itself to the width of the screen. But you will not find something like Bootstrap that gives you out of the box the responsiveness. You will have to write it yourself, or you can wait that someone eventually take the lead and do that before you.
This is the main issue, the main, זה העיקרי בין איוניק נגיד Famous. Ionic gives you the whole UI components, you can just start in 5 minutes to build your app, but Famous doesn't give you anything other than the physics and the animation. So if you want to use Famous, it would be difficult at first, but it depends what are the needs.
Given that you have your own I don't know, scene graph or replacement for DOM tweak, does it support features such as touch detection or stuff that we in Cocos I think we had to implement it ourselves because they didn't have anything for that?
So they support the touch, all the event that you're supposed to get from a mobile device are supported.
What about text input?
What?
What about text input?
Text input also. You can put a text input. All of the things you're talking about, you're going to see them live.
Yes,
There's also the directive NG-Touch.
What?
There's also directive Angular directive NG-Touch. So
Yes, but I don't think you want to mix the thing. I'm going to show you how you put a Famous scroll view in your main page, okay? And how each surface is going to bubble up. Each surface you put in the scroll view is going to bubble up the event to the main scroll view that catches them, and then you have everything you need to know what velocity the user has scrolled the view and what position is the scroll view. So you want to stick, I think, if you are going to do transition based on the user input, whether they are touch or even textual, you want to stick with what Famous gives you out of the box.
is there an ecosystem or community of extensions with framework?
Yeah, if you dig into GitHub, there are a lot of projects. I saw someone who is doing Google Maps in Famous and some other combinations, but it starts to pop up slowly. Yeah. Any other questions? No? 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 You wanna break?
Let's make a break.